right, grant evaluation demo. Okay, so yes, I'm Ken Krugler, uh, founder of AI for Community, nonprofits. And something I'm going to say is I love questions. Like they're the best parts of meetups and trainings because it helps me gauge whether what I'm saying is making sense. And often the questions are things where I'm like, I don't really know the answer to that. Which is great because that's an area that I need to explore more. So if you have a question, we're going to talk about like a good way for you to be able to ask the question while still me being able to keep going through the demo. So during this thing, if everybody could mute your microphone, turn on video, and use the raise hand thing in Zoom if you have a question, or you can also just type it into the meeting chat, and Alora or Erica are going to be taking a look at that. And if I don't see it, because often I won't, because I'm focused on the screen, they'll like give me a little heads up that somebody's got a question. Um, all right, and AI for Community, it's a nonprofit I started. The goal is I'm trying to teach nonprofits how to effectively and responsibly use AI. So, we spend almost 30% of the time in the class talking about like the issues with AI, right? It's not an AI fanboy class. It's like, here's how you can be effective with it, and here's all the things you can do that could cause problems. At AI for Community, we're using AI for everything, right? I mean, that's the best way for me to make sure I really understand how to use it for a nonprofit, which includes trying to find and apply for grants. So now we're getting into the demo, AI for grant evaluation. So all of the grant systems out there, they're just like, okay, yes, AI, we're AI, we have AI. Like they're all doing it because it is such a potentially useful and obvious application for AI. Help me find grants that make sense for my organization and help me apply for them effectively. So when I'm evaluating grants, I'm using a paid Claude plan. So Claude is one of the three big AI systems, right? There's ChatGPT from OpenAI, there's Gemini from Google, and there's Claude from Anthropic. We have a nonprofit plan, which is Claude Team. If you don't have this, I mean, this is my favorite AI for nonprofits. The Claude Team plan, it's like $40 a month for 5 people. So it's like $8 per person per month. And it gives you access to like really good models and reasonable rate limits. So that's why I think and personally, for a lot of things I think nonprofits do, I really like Claude. Like Claude out of the three, or really it's Anthropic out of the three, has kind of the values that most align, I think, with nonprofits versus OpenAI or Google. So if you had to pick one, I'd probably go with Claude. For the grant system, I'm using Instrumental. And the reason I'm using Instrumental is because Bright Futures for Youth, a local nonprofit, said, hey, we have an open, like you get 10 projects. We have a project we're not using. Do you want to use it? And I was like, okay, let's go. So it's not that I think Instrumental is better than the others or, has some AI capabilities that I like. It's the one I can access and it seems reasonably good. It definitely seems better than some of the other systems I've been trying recently. But I don't know, like, I don't know, Grant Station, or there's so many others. I haven't evaluated them. During this demo, I might have time to show you something that's kind of advanced, which is how I use Claude Desktop, which is normally you're interacting with these AIs using the web browser, but Claude Desktop is an application that you can get for your Mac or your Windows that lets you do a lot more things like move files around on your computer. And, it has extra capabilities that become important for some of the things if you're dealing with grants. So I might be able to do a quick demo of that, but it's a much deeper topic. So, it's going to be at the very end. So what's the high level plan here? In the course, the training course that I teach, when we're talking about analysis, and that's what this is analysis. It's not you typing into the window, hey, give me some good fundraising ideas and like getting some responses back. In this case, we have a bunch of data, right? We're going to be getting PDFs from different grants, and we're going to be asking Claude to analyze them. So this is analysis. with most AI type tasks, there's this process where it's like, what's the goal? How do I want you to try and get there? And what does success look like? How do we know that we're done? And in a way, this is just like, it's like management 101. Like if you had an employee working for you, right, it's exactly what you ought to be doing. Like clearly, here's our goal. Here's how I want you to go about doing it. And here's when you know you've done a good job, right? It's the same for AI. So being able to clearly articulate that, like in English with an AI, is the new superpower. It's kind of funny. It's sort of like it's not people think like, oh, if I'm going to be a really good AI user, it's like I have to be super technical. No. You have to know good management and you got to be able to write clearly in English. Those are the real powers. So in this case, what's the goal? It's like evaluate a grant to see if it's a good match for my organization, right? That's the goal. So what's the process? Create context, which means I'm going to give you information about my nonprofit and our goals. That's the context. So the AI can do a good job of looking at some potential grant and giving me feedback on it. And similar to most analysis tasks, in which we've talked about a lot in training, context is king, right? If I can give good, focused context, I'm going to get much better results out of AI. And that's why in this demo, the first thing I'm going to walk through is how I use Claude to create that good context. Because without that, you're not going to get good results. So what's the process though? I'm going to create this context. I'm going to download the PDF. I'm going to ask Claude to evaluate it, right? And an important step with any analysis when evaluating, when trying to decide if the AI is doing a good job is you need to manually get some examples of good and bad grants, right? So that when I'm asking AI, Claude in this case, to do the evaluation, does that evaluation match my expectations? And if it doesn't, why not? Am I missing something from my context? Do I need to change the instructions I'm giving the AI? Because you want to make sure that grants that you have looked at as a human and said, these are good, AI does the same thing. And if you look at it and say, this is not a good grant for me, again, AI is going to do the same thing. So good analysis requires good context. So the very first thing we're going to do is create what's called an overview document, some document for AI for community that does a good job of describing us for somebody who's a grant writer, let's say, or a grant specialist. And the analysis, I'm going to find manually good and bad examples, and I'm going to compare Claude's output with mine. So now we're going to go into the demo. All right. So this is my Claude, web UI. Right? You can see down here, it's got AI for community in the bottom left corner. That's because I've got this paid nonprofit plan. I also have a personal plan that I use for personal things. Right. And that I think I don't talk about this in the training, but it's a good point. You really want to separate, like with emails, etc., work life from personal life. So if you do have a paid plan, be intentional about switching back and forth. If I'm asking for dinner recipes, let's do it with my personal plan, not use up the tokens from my nonprofit for coming up with a side dish. So in this case, I'm using AI for community. And the first thing I do is I take advantage of Claude artifacts. And you can see here on the left side, there's a thing called artifacts. So what artifacts are is it's a thing that you're creating, typically a document, where you're interacting with Claude to create that document. So in this case right here, I've got this AI for community grant evaluation artifact. And I've created a whole bunch. I've created like a Google Ads review framework and a quick fact sheet about AI for community. This one right here is the grant evaluation. So I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to say, I need a document that describes AI for community that uses context when evaluating whether your funding opportunity is a good match and viable. So not just that, like it's, yes, what they're funding is what I do, but also what are the odds of me getting, like winning that grant opportunity, right? So I'm giving it these instructions. And then I ask, what information do you need from me? Which is a key thing when working with AI, because AI can tell you what it needs, right? So it's like, great, I can help you create that. So it asked a bunch of questions about current financials, organizational capacity, track record, etc. So, my budget for this year is $50,000. I expect this much in donations, etc. I have a half-time admin person. I have 3 board members, etc. So then it goes through and it creates this grant evaluation profile. It's a document, which you're seeing off on the right here. And I read through it and I said, okay, but it's missing a couple things. So I'm like, I did a startup, right? Which means I know how to take in $10 million and effectively, and efficiently use it, which I think is important in terms of talking about us to grantors. And our model for training is highly leveraged in that if I teach somebody how to use AI effectively, let's say they're 5% more effective over the course of the year. That's like worth $3,000 to $5,000 in staff time. So this is a highly leveraged model, which for some organizations that are about effective altruism is important. So I tell it that, and it goes ahead and it revises it. Um, and then I'm like, you know what? I looked through this and it's missing some information about our nonprofit. And I have an organization. I have another document I created a while ago that talks about it, and I just pasted it in here. And it goes through and like says, well, we got some discrepancies between that document and what I've created. I answer the questions to resolve the discrepancies, and it gives me a final document, right? And that's this document over here. Who am I? What's the core programs? What's our capacity, staff governance, impact to date, scope, finances, etc. Grant evaluation framework, like what are strong fit indicators, um, you know, potential challenges when evaluating grants, like we're early stage, we don't have prior grant management experience, which it puts in bold because it correctly identified that as like, okay, this is going to be a major lift for you to get your first grant, right? Capacity, red flags, skip these kinds of grants. What are the talking points, et cetera. Like this is a pretty solid document, right? It's the document where if I was hiring somebody to try and get grants for me, this would be really useful for them, right? You want exactly the same kind of thing for AI. So that's the first step. Yes, Solar.
It's about 12 minutes, Ken.
Okay, so we're going to go a little over because obviously we're just getting into the good stuff. Um, all right, so that's the artifact, and I download the artifact. I can download it as Markdown. So as an example of what that means, here's a Markdown file. And Markdown files are really useful for AI. It's sort of a text format where it's like if this is a title, like header 1 is 1 hash, and header 2 is 2 hashes. And if it's italicized, you put stars around it. It's a semi-structured text format. So it's super easy for AI to consume Markdown files. Doesn't have to really do heavy parsing or anything. So that's why more and more you'll see people using Markdown files when they're interacting with AI. And in fact, in some research papers I read, a key thing that they did was take a bunch of PDFs and Word documents, et cetera, and turn them into Markdown files, right? Because it makes iterating with the AI much faster. The AI doesn't have to load special libraries to parse a Word document. So it's a Markdown file, and you can see what it looks like over here. It's that same document, and here you can see it displayed. This is what a typical Markdown-aware program would display it as, which looks similar to what I saw in Claude. I'm using this program, MWeb, that is all about Markdown to display this. All right, so now if I go back over to Claude, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project here. And projects in Claude are where you can give it like instructions and documents that are always available to Claude. And then when I start a chat with it, like I start an evaluation, all of that information is there, ready to be used. So in this case right here, this evaluate grant opportunities project, if you look um, at it down here, you can see instructions. And these instructions are like the static things that are part of every chat in this project. So I'm like, you are an expert in nonprofit grant writing. You will only recommend writing a grant application if the opportunity aligns well with our organization's goals and capabilities. right? So that's the instruction. Now, I didn't have these next two things in there when I first created this, right? Um, I also then uploaded the document. Down here, you can see files, and I've got this document down here, AI grant profile. That's that markdown file that we were just looking at. And I also have a quick fact sheets about my nonprofit, which is just a little bit more context about who we are. So this is all the static stuff. Memory is information that Claude accumulates through interactions with this project. So memory, as I interact with it, it's sort of learning, how do I want it to evaluate grants, right? So memory is how it saves that learning. So then I've got up here like a Sony funding opportunity. And I took a look at this where it's looking at, what I did is I gave it a PDF file. And this is a PDF file where I'd gone to instrumental. And I think this was one of these in Tracker, maybe. No, it was actually over in the main thing. But basically, I went to one of these projects. Let's see if I got it down here anyway. Well, whatever. I click on like Future of Work Accelerator Grant by HP. And over here on the opportunity side, there's a download button here where I can download the PDF. Right. And that PDF is a description of the grant opportunity. So I gave it that PDF here. And it's like, recommendation worth pursuing, but with tempered expectations. The core fit is solid, considerations an unknown. Um, but it's like the grant amount is unspecified, the listing is thin on details. And the interesting thing down here is it gives me a confidence score. The reason it gives me a confidence score is because I personalized Claude. And the way I personalize Claude is if I go over here to settings. These personal preferences are things that are part of every chat with Claude. And one of the things is end responses with a confidence score and brief justification. And I find this sort of personalization, which is part of every chat, reduces hallucination and gives me a really useful score where I can evaluate, like, do I trust this response? So if we go back to projects and we look at that simple funding opportunity, this is a low confidence score. I mean, 9 and above, I'm like, okay, this was pretty solid. 8's like a little, we're down to 6.5. That is not a high confidence score. I noticed it said, the listing is thin on details. So if I click on this PDF, well, actually, if I go and I look, let's see, over here, I have somewhere here among the many projects, I have this PDF. I'm going to put it over on the screen here. Can you see that? I hope so. Everybody can see that. Okay, you can see there's like almost nothing in it, right? Like this is the description, but you can see a little more about this opportunity by visiting the funder's website, right? So because of that, I changed the project's description, the instructions here to say, when analyzing a funding opportunity, we'll follow any relevant links to the funder's website to gather additional information, right? So that, again, this is an important thing to understand. You're kind of working through this step by step. You don't want to like batch stuff until you have confidence that this works. So then when I reran the evaluation and it followed these links, and you can see it did research 5 minutes, 23 seconds. And now it's like Sony is a poor fit where it's targeting youth education and creative media programs. And it actually generated an artifact here, where if I click on this, here's the full report. And it's extensive. right? It's this is like a real research report. Now, one of the reasons why it's so extensive is because, again, if I go back here to the project, this is the Evaluate Grant Opportunities project, and you look at the instructions, down here, I turned on web search because these are little icons at the bottom. I turned on web search because I wanted it to be able to go out to the web and fetch stuff. But also I enabled research and extended thinking. So what research means is it's going to do sort of a deep dive on this topic. Um, and extended thinking, well, sorry, in research, the key thing about research is it's going to take a problem and try and automatically break it up into smaller problems. And the extended thinking is it's going to spend more time on each one of those small subtasks, which gives me that extensive report you saw. It also means it's going to churn through my number of tokens per day limit that I have with Claude. And until I started doing this kind of thing, I never hit my limit with Claude. Once I turned this on, I started hitting the limit pretty regularly. So it will burn through tokens. Why does that matter? Well, let's take a look at this Stacy funding opportunity. Um, and here, if you look at this, you can see research complete, 220 sources. Like it fetched 220 documents and pages from the web, and it processed all of them. Um, and it generated a very extensive document here where it's like, look, this is an organization that funds Christian organizations, right? So this is not a good match for you. But it took me 2 tries to get this done because I ran out of tokens the first time I did it. So that's where I said, okay, I'm going to edit the instructions again. And the change I'm going to make is this part. Um, if it doesn't clearly align, you will stop doing research and return a summary result. Do not do deep research or extended thinking or additional web searches in those situations, right? So limit, how much time you're spending on this, which also means limit your use of tokens, which is like essentially words, because otherwise I'm going to hit my per day limit. Does that make sense? All right. So then I looked at, so I had still Sony funding, sorry, this Stacy, it came up with negative, which I expected. So great. That's what I wanted. I knew that Vanguard Charitable was a good match. So remember I said try a negative match and try a positive match, probably more than one, but just to make sure that how the AI is evaluating grants matches my expectation. Um, and here it says yes. It looks like a remarkably strong fit, right? So then it does the deep dive, 255 sources, 8 minutes, right? I'm not, okay, if it's a strong match, go deep. Um, and it generated this very detailed response. It says you may have missed this cycle because I didn't submit a letter of intent by December 8th. It's a perfect mission alignment. You know, Likely qualifies, and then it goes on and on. And ultimately, it comes down with like, so here is an opportunity that you should pursue, but you've missed this cycle. Get ready for the next cycle. That was the net of what it said. All right, Alora.
We've got about 10 minutes for Q&A, Ken.
Okay. So I have, yeah, I could show you um something I did with this is Claude, the desktop application. Um, and what I did is I gave it a folder full of these PDFs that I downloaded. There are 15 of them that I downloaded at various times. And I'd asked it to, um, go through and analyze each grant opportunity. Originally, I was trying to demo it using the instrumental site directly, which is another whole interesting thing, using the Claude Chrome extension, where we'll talk about that. But instead, I said, okay, just take the folder and look at them. and it ran through all of these grant opportunities. And it's like, here are the four that I want to pursue. Here are two I might want to investigate more, and there are nine that are a skip, right? One notable near miss is OpenAI's People First. It requires a $500,000 annual operating budget, but maybe I could talk my way out of that. All right. So the very last thing I'm going to do is go here. Um, so this is this thing of like, how do I actually find the grants at scale? So I'm using Claude Desktop and Claude extension for Chrome. And the Claude extension for Chrome, what you'll see is it looks something like this, where I have a web page open and I have this Claude extension where it shows a little Claude icon up here near the top. I hope you can see that. When I click that, it opens up a little window to the right. And now I can give Claude commands to do things like click on the download icon to download the PDF. Right? I can have it automate things because it kind of act like the user, which is incredibly powerful. Um, both Claude Desktop and Claude Extension, you have to have a paid Claude account. You can't be using the free one. Um, you have all the same things as context for doing the grant evaluation. The nice thing is with Claude Desktop, I can say, start with this project that I've defined, which is that grant evaluation project in Claude. Let's use that as our starting point. Before you start doing batch processing and churning through tokens, you do the grant by grant evaluation, like I was just showing you. And then I can say, here, Claude, here's a folder with 200 PDFs, let's say, that I've either manually downloaded or used the Claude extension to download. Let's go through all of these and pick out the ones that are most interesting. But, now you're doing it at scale. So it's really easy to blow your Claude per day token limit. All right. And I'm thinking of recording a video of using this Claude extension and Claude Desktop. I mean, it's now it is getting a little technical once you get to that level, but it's incredibly powerful. Right? I mean, imagine having to click through 200 grants and click the PDF download button one at a time. Okay, that's painful. And that's exactly where, like, when I teach the class, I say use AI for the tedious, right? Use AI to automate the tedium. And that's an example of tedium. All right, so any questions?
Or raise your hand if you think Ken should do a whole workshop on using AI with grant research. There's a lot of material there, Ken.
There is. I mean, it was fun coming up with this demo. I've been using it, but then I really had to sit down and think through the process, all the things I'd been doing just as I research grants and how to talk about them. And that actually helped me come up with a better process for my organization, which is fun. So thank you for, encouraging me through this meetup to do that work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm like, I've got things like, what grant systems are people using now? Is anybody using a good AI tool with grants that they're like, yes, it does all the things you were just doing with Claude? I would love to know about that. I haven't heard of any, but I'm not a professional grant writer, so like, I don't know who's actually using um, grant systems right now. Anyone? Nope.
We do have a question in the chat, Ken, that has
Oh,
nothing to do with who's using grant systems, which would be really
oh,
interesting to know. But
oh,
someone,
right. The confidence scale. So
Mhm.
the confidence scale is just because of those personalization instructions that I give Claude as part of my account setting, I tell it include a confidence score and justification for that score. And so then Claude, whenever it's doing something like this, is going to calculate a score. And it decided on its own a score of 1 to 10. Like I didn't ask it for that. It just decided that's what I'm going to do. And, it gives me a 8 point. It's always, either a number or something 0.5. Like that's the granularity of its score. And just through experience, I've come to realize, if it's maybe even 8.5 or above, I'm going to feel pretty good about its answer. And if it's less than a 7, I'm definitely like, something's missing here. Like I haven't specified things clearly enough, or I haven't given it enough context. There's some problem, and I need to fix things for it. Does that answer the question?
I hope we
Let's see.
got, yes, Linda said yes. So there's another question about finding possible grants. Dom says, what's a good way to find possible grants out there for AI to evaluate?
So that's where, like an instrumental, when I have my project, I can use instrumental support for filtering all of the many, hundreds of thousands of grants it knows about to ones that might be appropriate for me, like that involve capacity building, training, AI stuff. I've got some keywords. That filtered it down to a list of about 200 and some. And this is where then I could use the Claude extension and Claude Desktop to automatically go through these one at a time, click the grant title, click the download PDF button, wait for the PDF to get downloaded, go to the next one, right? And it will do that, for me, and I'll wind up with a folder filled with these PDFs, and then I use Claude Desktop to go through all of those PDFs one at a time and generate that report like what you saw. I didn't do all of them in this because I think I would have hit my token limit, and then I wouldn't have been able to do any demos for you in this in this meetup, because we'd have to wait till like 5 p.m. tonight or whenever it resets. So I just did 15. Yeah.
Thanks. So Julie's got a question, and then Kalen has offered to talk about his grant writing and discover process. So Julie, what is your question?
So, do you have a rule of thumb, like when it's useful to set up a project in Claude? Like if you're evaluating just 2 grant applications, it'd be better to just do it manually, right? So, is there some number where it's worth it?
Well, okay, yes and no with just 2. But one of the things I've found is with creating a project, it
Hmm.
forces me to think through very clearly, here's the instructions, here's the context. It's like a really intentional process. And so I find it useful, even if I'm not planning on using it for tons of things. It sort of gives me a structure.
Like a
Okay, that
business
makes sense.
plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Kalen, we'd love to hear about your grant writing and discover process.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I have been using Claude Code, which is a, third variation of the Claude ecosystem. There's probably what a lot of people first get introduced to, which is, just going to the website or talking on your phone to Claude. And then Ken showed kind of the elevated version of that with Claude Desktop. But I think it's important to point out that Ken was using something called Claude Cowork within the Claude Desktop version, and that's not available for people on Windows. They claim that it is, but it's not yet. And that is more like what Claude Code can do. It's really a lot more going on underneath the hood. And I've been using Claude Code for a long time. And I wanted to point out too for Ken, you can, for the nonprofit teams, you can upgrade to a premium seat just for one person for yourself. I think it's, like you said, $8 for the standard seat, and that gives you a certain amount of tokens that you can use per day. But yeah, you're gonna hit your limits pretty hard if you're doing things like research and really triaging multiple PDF files at a time. And the premium seat is not that much more expensive, and it'll give you like 5 times more usage. And yeah, if you're going to be doing these kinds of things, yeah, with looking through huge swaths of data from Candid or grants.gov, yeah, you're gonna need to be paying a little bit more per month. But if you're using the nonprofit pricing, it's a lot easier. And that is what I use. I use Candid. I will go and download a huge chunk of data that's refined down with some discriminating searches about, the North Star House organization in general, what we are, what we're looking for, what kind of grants I think we could apply for. And then that huge chunk of data gets downloaded and then processed and run up against, like Ken was saying, kind of like an information inventory about what your organization is. And then it scores it. And then with Claude Code, I don't know if you can do it with Cowork. Sorry, my toddler's right here. Oh, hi. Um, you can connect it to something like Notion, like a database, and then have it actually extract the useful information that you've grabbed and sort it and process it and kind of keep it off to the side for the future really easily and automatically. So that if you want to ask questions of it again in the future, you don't have to redo the research. You could just kind of point your AI agent, whatever it is that you're using, to the database and have it really see the whole spider web of connections. So that's, mainly what I've been doing is kind of grabbing lots of information, processing it, and storing it in a database to access later. It provides a lot of transparency too for the other team members at the North Star House to just look, where are we with this grant? They can just go straight to the database. It's perfectly updated with all the research, and all that is largely automated with Claude Code. Then you can download skills and make your own skills to make it act in the exact way that you want. Anyway, like Ken is saying, you can talk for a long time on the technical aspect of that kind of thing. And I hope that he does, because it is really, really powerful stuff. You can basically have a whole team.
So thank you. That's great. Something I didn't mention is that in instrumental, what I can do is have Claude co-work, the Claude desktop sort of co-work mode, talk to the Claude extension, and when I find a good opportunity, it saves it, which adds it to the tracker in instrumental. So that's how I have my list of like top grants that I'm researching. So I'm essentially leveraging instrumental support for having like the grants that are in motion. And I'm just using Claude's Chrome extension to automate that process of like, yes, this grant looks good. Let's save it. So now it's in my tracker.
So we are a couple minutes over, and there's one more question. Ken, do you have a couple more minutes to answer this last question?
Sure. If you have multiple people using a Claude account, like for one Claude account, multiple people, it's a little challenging and becoming harder in the sense that more and more these AIs learn from your interactions. They have memory, and so uh, it becomes harder to have more than one person using the same account and not sort of step on each other's feet. Having said that, sure, if it's like, I don't know, I've got a Cloud account, I've done some work, I've created a project, you can see the results, and now somebody else logs in and maybe takes it the next step. In theory, yes, that would work. But what I'd say is just get the Claude nonprofit pricing, which gives you 5 people, and it's Claude Team, which means now everybody on your team can see each other's projects and things if once you can decide whether you want to share them or not. And so that really helps collaboration in a way that works well with personalization.